They said Miss Franz never blinked. That detail would have been odd on its own, but what scared me was the way she reached for control the moment the room fell quiet. I was in 6th grade and stuck with a clarinet because Grandpa had one lying around. I wanted a sax, but this was what I got. Miss Franz ran the band like a command center, precise, cool, and somehow always 2 beats ahead. I didn't have many friends back then, so I stayed after school to practice more than anyone else. She noticed. She started offering extra lessons at her house. I said no, at first. She asked again and again. It made my skin crawl. But I kept showing up to school anyway because the band was supposed to be safe. Predictable, normal. The parade was announced like a dream for our new school, a chance for exposure, pride, something to cheer about. We rehearsed until our mouths hurt, and on the day, everything seemed perfect. Permission slips signed, instruments tuned. Parents watching. After the parade, when everyone was picked up, I was the last one left. The bus noise, the cheering, the cotton candy blur, it all shrank until there was only Miss Franz and me on the curb. She grabbed my hand the moment the last kid's parent walked away and said I could call my mom from her car. Her grip was firm, not panicked, like she'd rehearsed this exact motion. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it looked normal because I'd shot up that year, and she wasn't tall. Nobody was watching closely. She guided me away from the crowd toward a dark green SUV that looked like every late 90s parent car you'd ever seen. The parking rows emptied. I remember thinking, briefly, that maybe I'd misread her persistence as kindness. Then I heard my name. My mom came running, panting, frantic, sprinting across the lot like someone had thrown a switch inside her. Miss Franz tightened her hold and started to move faster. Mom didn't stop to ask questions. She yanked me free from Miss Franz's hand as if she'd been waiting for a moment to invade. The whole thing lasted 5 seconds and felt like forever. Miss Franz's eyes locked on mine for a second that felt too long. Then she stepped back and vanished into the blur of cars and people. My mom drove me home in silence, and then, strangely, she fussed over me like I'd been rescued from a near miss, which was confusing because I was usually invisible. I never saw Miss Franz at school again. She seemed to be scrubbed from everything. No records, no mention, no one talking about what had happened. My family never brought it up. I was left with a hollow, unanswered feeling and the memory of a hand that wouldn't let go. Years later, the whole thing feels like a scar under my skin, a small, persistent throb whenever I'm the last person among a crowd. Whenever someone offers an unnecessary kindness that smells like rehearsal. I never learned Miss Franz's first name. I never knew if anyone else remembered her the way it did. The band room carries its own echoes now. Sometimes when the windows catch the light just right, I can almost hear a teacher's metronome, slow and insistent. The parade should have been a bright, proud day. Instead, it became the day I realized how quickly ordinary things can tilt into something dangerous and how quietly people can disappear from our lives without explanation. If this story hit a nerve, subscribe for more true accounts that sit at the edge of ordinary days, because sometimes the scariest moments are the ones that look normal at first glance.
I've worked in retail long enough to know that customers can be weird, rude, or just plain creepy. But this man, he wasn't like anyone I'd ever met before. He didn't shout, didn't joke, didn't flirt. He just watched, quietly, for hours. He first showed up on a Tuesday afternoon, middle-aged, maybe mid-40s. Wore a gray hoodie even though it was hot out. He stood in the corner aisle pretending to look at the same pack of batteries for almost 30 minutes. When I walked by to ask if he needed help, he smiled without moving his eyes from the shelf and said, "Just looking." His voice was calm, too calm, like he was talking from a script. After that, he started coming in almost every day. Same time, same aisle, same fake browsing. Sometimes he'd pick up random things, place them back in the wrong spot, then stare at the security mirrors as if he knew exactly where the cameras were. One evening, as we were closing, I saw him standing outside in the parking lot facing the store, but not moving. He stayed there until I turned off the lights. The next morning, my manager pulled me aside and asked if I'd left the back door unlocked. I hadn't, but someone had been inside overnight. Nothing was stolen, except the employee's schedule posted near the break room. My name and my shifts were circled in red marker. That same night, he came in again. I tried to act normal, scanning barcodes while my hands shook. He placed a single item on the counter, a small pack of batteries, the same kind he'd stared at on his first visit. When I told him the total, he leaned in slightly and whispered, "You should really stop working late." His breath smelled like dust and metal. Then he smiled, paid an exact change, and walked out. I reported it, of course, but security footage showed nothing. The cameras had glitched right before he came in, black screen for the full 5 minutes he was there. A week later, I switched stores. Sometimes, though, when I close up at night, I still catch a glimpse of someone standing just outside the glass doors. Same hoodie, same stillness, always facing me. And every time I look again, he's gone. I used to think living alone would be peaceful. No roommates, no noise, no one using up my groceries, just me in the small one-bedroom apartment I'd rented at the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, until I started hearing footsteps coming from the attic above my ceiling. At first, I brushed it off. The place was old. Maybe it was rats or the wind pushing something loose, but the sounds were too heavy. Measured, slow steps that moved from one end of the ceiling to the other. It always happened around midnight. I'd lie in bed, staring at the plaster, waiting for it to stop. But it never did. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a broom and banged the ceiling 3 times. The footsteps stopped immediately. I laughed nervously, thinking I'd scared off whatever it was. Then 3 distinct knocks came back, exactly matching mine. After that night, things started to move in my apartment. The remote would end up on the kitchen counter when I was sure I'd left it on the couch. My shoes were turned backward at the door. Sometimes I'd find small piles of dust in the middle of the floor, as if someone had stepped down from the attic and tracked it in. The landlord told me no one had access up there. It was sealed off, and even the maintenance guy didn't have a key. He joked that maybe I had a ghost. I didn't laugh. One night, I came home late from work, exhausted. The apartment felt colder than usual. When I turned on the lights, I noticed something strange. The attic door panel in the hallway ceiling was slightly open, just enough for me to see a shadowed gap. My stomach dropped. I stood there for a long time, my heart thudding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Then I saw movement, a hand, pale and thin, pulling the attic door slowly shut. I ran outside and called the police. When they arrived, they found a small mattress, empty food wrappers, and a phone charger wedged into an outlet up there. Someone had been living above me for weeks, watching me, listening, moving only when I slept. The officers said the person must be escaped through the maintenance hatch on the other side of the building before they got there. They never found whoever it was. I moved out the next morning. Now, every time I rent a new place, the first thing I do is look up. I don't care how nice it is or how cheap the rent. If there is an attic door, I don't stay.
Last summer, I decided to spend a weekend hiking through the redwoods alone. I'd been through those trails dozens of times with friends, but never by myself. I wanted quiet. The kind of silence that feels alive, with the wind threading through the trees and sunlight breaking in thin gold lines. The first day was perfect. I made camp near a creek, cooked noodles on my small stove, and listened to the forest settle into evening. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps circling my tent. At first, I thought it was an animal. I called out softly, hoping to scare it away, but the footsteps stopped immediately. Too sudden for an animal. The forest went dead quiet. I held my breath, waiting for something else, but heard nothing. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just my imagination, and fell back asleep. The next morning, I found boot prints in the dirt, not mine. They circled my tent twice before leading off into the woods. I should have left right then, but I told myself it was probably a ranger or another camper. Still, as I packed up, I noticed something that didn't make sense. My food bag had been unzipped and then zipped closed again. Nothing missing, just moved. That night, I camped further up the ridge. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. No bugs, no birds, just wind that barely touched the treetops. Around dusk, I saw something between the trunks ahead. It wasn't moving, but it wasn't a tree either. I blinked, and it was gone. When darkness came, I couldn't sleep. Every crack of a branch sounded deliberate. Then, somewhere behind me, a voice whispered, "Don't go." It was so close that I froze. I didn't turn around. I just sat there, listening to my heartbeat until the sky started to gray. When I finally looked, there were more footprints, dozens of them, all around my tent, like people had been walking in circles all night. I didn't eat, didn't even pack properly. I just left. The trail felt endless, and for hours I swore I could hear soft steps following just behind me. When I reached the parking lot, my car was the only one there. The ranger at the entrance said no one else had checked in that weekend. Sometimes, I still wake up at night and hear that whisper, low, slow, right next to my ear. I haven't been camping since.
Don't forget to subscribe because there are more stories like this, waiting to be told.